And there'll be more lefties losing it with my next guest. Now, we know the two biggest issues in America are inflation and the border crisis. Yes, cost of living pressures and record numbers of illegal immigrants coming in via that southern border are top of mind for voters in the coming presidential election. So let's hear now from the Democrat nominee on how she will handle those critical issues. Here she's asked about inflation.
What else are you going to do to fix this problem with inflation?
All right, thank you. Well, let's start with this. Prices have gone up, and families and individuals are dealing with the realities of that bread costs more, that gas costs more. And we have to understand what that means. That's about the cost of living going up. That's about having to stress and stretch limited resources. That's about a source of stress for families that is not only economic, but is on a daily level, something that is a heavy weight to carry. So it is something that we take very seriously. Very seriously.
That's the woman they're presenting as an inspired, strong leader who can lead us all in the free world. And it gets considerably worse when it comes to illegal immigration. She's on the record supporting free healthcare for illegal immigrants, not even wanting the term illegal to be used. And she's even passionately defended those who pay human traffickers to bring them across the border. Like most neo-Marxists, she's at her core pro-open borders. She even sought to compare ICE, that's Immigration and Custom Enforcement, to the Ku Klux Klan. I wish I was kidding.
Well, the Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between
I'm talking about perception.
officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
That puts ICE in the same category as the KKK. Is that what you're asking me?
Oh, she wasn't done yet. That footage is from 2018, but Kamala was keen to drive the point home that ICE is akin to the KKK. Why? Because they enforce the law.
You know, are you aware of a perception that the way that the discretion
I see no parallel.
I'm not finished.
I see none.
I'm not finished. I'm not finished. Are you aware that there's a perception that ICE is administering its power in a way that is causing fear and intimidation, particularly among immigrants and specifically among immigrants coming from Mexico and Central America?
Joining me now is the Senior Editor-at-Large of Newsweek and Article 3 Project Senior Counsel, Josh Hammer. Josh, is America ready for a president who compares ICE agents to members of the KKK?
Rita, America is becoming a more left-leaning place on a seemingly daily basis. But, you know, I have to think that the answer is no. You know, Kamala Harris has been on the wrong side of every civilisational jihad against the West and against the United States over the entire course of her not particularly illustrious career. So we have seen here the comparison between ICE and the KKK. Well, you know, let me explain to a first grader, probably better than what Kamala Harris can do when she's talking about how inflation means prices going up. Let me try to explain to a first grader the difference between ICE and the KKK. ICE is a law enforcement agency of the United States government. The Ku Klux Klan was the very quintessence of vigilante justice. By the way, vigilante justice actually oriented towards injustice, not actual justice. I don't have to get into how morally ignominious it was, but the mere fact that one is a governmentally sanctioned body and the other is vigilantism, that in and of itself ought to demonstrate that there is simply no comparison here. But around the same time that Kamala Harris was interrogating their comparing patriotic ICE agents to the Ku Klux Klan, That was within a few months of her very leading role in the September 2018 jihad against then Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. Kamala Harris, along with Cory Booker, that fateful day in late September 2018, she was one of the leading inquisitors who hashtag believe all women. She took Christine Blasie's word for it that Brett Kavanaugh was a serial gang rapist. The left on that day in September 2018, Rita, throughout 5,000 years of civilisational innocent until proven guilty norms, Kamala Harris was one of the absolute ringleaders of that. She should be made to answer for that, frankly, right now in this calendar year on the presidential campaign trail.
Well, she doesn't seem to be paying for anything. There seems to be no accountability, little scrutiny of her record. It's like she's just been introduced to the American people for the first time, and she's this amazing visionary, fresh young leader who's going to lead the free world into prosperity and peace. When, like, as you said, and you look at her record, she has been on the wrong side of just about every significant fight in America. We saw her campaigning for the BLM writers, even raising bail money. She said that they should keep protesting, and some of those protests involved very much violent action. Are we going to see that sort of scrutiny and accountability, or is she just going to have a honeymoon run all the way to the November poll?
Look, the media is trying their darndest. You know, it's so funny, Rita. So the June 27th CNN presidential debate happens, and for about 3 to 4 weeks, the American corporate media decides to be real journalists. It lasted about 3 to 4 weeks. They actually held the regime's feet to the fire. They held them accountable for this lie, which, by the way, the media was complicit in the first place. It's not like it was just the administration. The media was complicit in it. So they pretended to be real journalists to accomplish their end, and their end, obviously, was the coup d'etat of Joe Biden for Kamala Harris. Ever since the coup finished, they have pulled a complete 180. They were holding Biden's feet to the fire. You can't hear a peep from them now. You know, it's as if just a pin drop, and you can't even hear it at this point. No one is making any noise. Kamala Harris is now over 2 weeks into her coup of Joe Biden. She has not faced a single straightforward question that I am aware of from an actual media source. Even more to the point, you know, I checked her campaign website yesterday, the Kamala Harris for President website. I don't see a list of actual policy positions on there. I don't see a list of where she stands on immigration, foreign policy, the economy, taxation, inflation, guns, abortion, you name it. It's not there. It's literally not there. So the woman is a totally empty vessel at this point. And I guess that is what she is hoping to accomplish. But I don't think it's going to work, especially in the aftermath of the stock market crash, the Kamala Harris crash, if you will, there. I don't think it's going to work. She's not going to be able to coast her way till November, but the media is certainly trying their darndest to let her do it.
Now, you mentioned the stock market crash. Wall Street was diving, fears the US is on the verge of a recession. The stock market woes began in Japan with the Nikkei index diving, but the US in particular, Josh, is in a perilous situation economically. You've got weak economic data, including those job figures, which they tried to blame on Trump. I thought that was very interesting from the Harris campaign, blaming the poor job figures on Trump somehow. It seems like Bidenomics, if that's what we're still calling it, isn't working too well.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. So the Joe Biden campaign pumped a lot of money this past September, so almost a year ago now. They pumped a lot of money into NFL, National Football League opening kickoff weekend. And specifically the NFL season, which is very popular here in America, it opens on a Thursday night. They've been doing this for about 20 years. The Biden campaign dumped a ton of money on a coast-to-coast national ad buy for that Thursday night football game almost a year ago, specifically on the issue of Bidenomics. And ever since then, they have just totally ditched it. It lasted for about a month and a half, 2 months after that. They haven't mentioned the word Bidenomics. It probably has been 6, 7, 8 months. And how could you possibly mention it? I mean, what record is there other than total and complete incompetence to possibly reference? I mean, we're talking about an economy that entered a formal recession in the year 2022, recession, which, by the way, they tried to gaslight us and tried to come up with a different definition of the word recession other than the one that has been universally recognized by economists of all political stripes for decades, which is back-to-back quarters of negative GDP growth. Remember, the White House press secretary secretary got up there and said, no, it's actually not recession. We're redefining it for you. So they tried to do that. They reached 9.1 inflation on the annualized CPI, consumer price index level, in the summer of 2022. That's the highest inflation has been in literally 40 years now. So they have no idea what they're doing on the economy. They cannot possibly run on the economy. Unfortunately for them, the economy, the cost of living, stagnant wages, and skyrocketing inflation remains the #1 issue, along with the southern border, on which the record is arguably even worse. So when you actually look at the issues, they are frankly in terrible position. Again, the question, to get back to what you said earlier, is will the media allow the conversation on these substantive issues to actually penetrate and then to resonate with the American voters? If the conversation is on the issues, Republicans will win.
If it's on the issues, but I doubt it's going to get there. The media seems to be obsessed with what they've always obsessed about, racial issues, identity politics, and these sort of gotcha moments. Now, I want to ask you about something that's a little bit contentious. It's been talked about, not much in the media. It's almost taboo there. But Josh, is it fair enough to go through Kamala Harris's past as they've gone through Trump's past? We've got her former lover on the record taking credit for giving her a start in the Democrat Party. She was only 29 years old when she dated 60-year-old Democratic Party kingmaker Willie Brown. This is back in 1994. He reportedly lavished her with all sorts of gifts, BMW, trip to Paris, tickets to the Academy Awards. And he's written in 2019 where he said, yes, I may have influenced her career by appointing her to 2 state commissions when I was Assembly Speaker, and I certainly helped with her first race for district attorney in San Francisco. Is this an area that is worthy of discussion, or does it really not matter how she got her start? I tend to think that her record, particularly in the Senate, is so damning that you don't need to look beyond that. But it's interesting that given her colourful past, that really hasn't been much discussion or investigation into how she got her start.
Well, I think it's fair game. I mean, it's not like it's off the table. I mean, look, Donald Trump, among his various legal persecutions/prosecutions, is the so-called hush money case in New York City, where we had a literal porn star, or at least an alleged porn star. I've never watched her material, but an alleged porn star, Stormy Daniels, on the stand, testifying about, in gratuitous detail, about an alleged one-night stand from 20 years ago. I mean, about who had what clothes on at what time. So, it's not like we're in this very prudish society where details of this nature are off the table. Details of this nature have very much been on the table, at least since the infamous Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal of the late 1990s here in the United States. So, it's fair game. If I were offering political advice to the Trump campaign, I tend to agree with you, which is that there is a lot easier fodder. There's a lot lower hanging fruit. This is probably not the absolute best way to go about attacking Kamala Harris. Again, she's been wrong on every major issue under the sun. But, the whole Willie Brown thing, this is all I will say. It does get at a broader truth about Kamala Harris, which is that she has continually failed upward in her career, to kind of use a term that I like. She's not a very talented politician, as that inflation clip earlier showed. She's frankly not a particularly bright politician. She continually is mediocre at best and actively harmful at worst in one position, whether it's San Francisco DA, US Senator, Vice President. She's terrible at basically every job she's ever held, and yet somehow she is promoted just a little higher. I think that is fair game potentially, but again, as you said, the actual record is probably the easier thing to get.
Josh, before you go, disturbing developments in the Middle East. A full-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah seems closer than any point since the October 7 attacks by Hamas. We know Hezbollah is bigger, it's more powerful than Hamas. They've got significant backing from Iran, and Iran's rhetoric has been dialed up since a Hamas leader was assassinated in Tehran. The Revolutionary Guards have vowed severe revenge. What does this mean for the people of Israel?
Yeah, it's a terrible situation. As I'm speaking to you, my in-laws are actually on a flight back to the United States from Israel. I mean, my brother-in-law lives a few miles from Gaza. I have a lot of family on my wife's side over there. So everyone is nervous. I mean, no one is particularly happy about the current situation there. Unfortunately, the Biden administration could have done so much to prevent this from getting to this point, obviously. After Israel allegedly, because we don't know for sure, but we all presume that they took out the Hamas leader Haniya in Tehran, as well as Shakor, the Hezbollah leader in Beirut, the Biden administration could have very easily said, we support Israel's ability to take out the people who committed the genocide on October 7th and are shelling civilians in northern Israel. Iran, don't you dare touch a finger on our ally or, by the way, on U.S. troops in the region, because another headline from earlier today showed that Iran-backed Iraqi militias fired yet again on U.S. bases in Iraq and wounded personnel there. So, when they're coming at Israel, they're also coming at U.S. never far behind there. The Biden administration could have done so much to prevent this from getting to this point. Unfortunately, they're doing the exact opposite of what a prudent foreign policy should do. It's common sense that a foreign policy should stand by your friends, warn your enemies. The Biden administration does the exact opposite. They tell Iran a pinprick strike is fine. They tell Bibi Netanyahu, don't you dare escalate there. So yet again, another catastrophe on the world stage perpetrated by the utter incompetence and, dare I say, even outright malice of the Biden-Harris administration at this point. But at this point, I'm frankly just praying for some sort of restoration of calm, albeit I fear that might not happen until January 2025, God willing.
Josh Hammer, thank you so much for your time this evening.